It's Star Trek Comic Treks, and here's your host, Starpad.
Hey everybody, how you doing today? We're here with a first look at the new series Star Trek Picard, Episode 1. And anybody that knows me knows I've been a bit skeptical about modern Star Trek. Was not really a huge fan of the J.J. Abrams verse. I thought the movies were mixed at best and did a lot of things wrong. So when Star Trek moved back to the TV, a few years back with Star Trek Discovery, I was still a bit skeptical because that crew was running the TV series. And once again, the first season of Star Trek Discovery has kind of been a mixed bag. The second season is better, but that's for another video. So the same crew decided to tackle Star Trek Picard when Patrick Stewart decided that he wanted to come back and take on the role again after about a 25, 30-year absence. And he wanted to do it because of probably a couple things. He was trying to reflect on some of the things happening in his own country of England and some of the things happening in America, and thought he could look at it with a Star Trek spin. And that's kind of always what Star Trek has done in the past. Although Star Trek has been more looking at our situations from the vantage points of alien cultures. They never really put it on us as a species. And Gene Roddenberry's original vision for Star Trek, and I think the reason why it's endured so many years is because it was a very optimistic look at the future. And I know that's what got me into Star Trek, because it was optimistic and hopeful of what we would strive to be and become by the 23rd and 24th centuries. You know, that's not to say Starfleet and the Federation were always shining beacons of untouchable. They were always Starfleet admirals were always corrupt and had hidden agendas. So that's nothing new to the Star Trek mythos. So, and I think what also influenced Patrick Stewart is that he took on that role of Professor X, and in Logan, he brought that full circle by looking at a Professor X that was older, losing his grip on his powers, and isn't somebody that's in the last stage of his life. And that's kind of like where Patrick Stewart is taking the Picard syndrome. If anybody remembers, at the end of Star Trek: The Next Generation, in the last episode, Beverly Crusher detected that Picard suffered from an anomaly in his frontal cortex that could turn into something called Irmatic syndrome in the future, where basically kind of like our the 80s version of dementia or Alzheimer's. And it looks like that's what's happening in this show, and we'll get into that in future episodes. So I think that's where Patrick Stewart was. We decided to bring back the character. But I went into the first episode of Picard pretty hopeful that we'd get a decent series. So let's take a look. So of course it opens up on the Enterprise D, and I think fans for the show would be glad to see the Enterprise D looking relatively like the Enterprise D. Star Trek Discovery had given us ships and past ships like the Enterprise that were radically different than what we saw in the original series. Granted, I had to look at it with a sense of, well, it's 2020, and the producers also want to have their own take on it. But I think you have to respect what's come before. Past shows like Enterprise have done that, where they've looked back at the past shows and they've updated them but treated them with respect. Where Discovery just kind of went their own way, and a lot of people couldn't get past that. I'm a little bit less rigid when it comes to adherence. As long as they tell a good story, they try to remain somewhat faithful. And so far, I think the first episode of Star Trek Picard does that. So it opens up showing the Enterprise D, and we go to 10 forward, and Captain Jean-Luc Picard, or maybe Admiral Jean-Luc Picard now, is playing poker with Lieutenant Commander Data. Now, Data Of course, spoiler for those who haven't watched the Star Trek movies, gave up his life at the end of Star Trek Nemesis to save the universe and the Enterprise. So he's been gone these last 25, 30 years. So we automatically know that this is probably a dream sequence or a flashback, because it couldn't possibly be happening now. So they're playing poker, and these were great scenes in the original series. Always good stuff when they sat down and played cards together. And Picard is making some ruminations that things look a little bit odd here. Data doesn't look quite the same. He can tell when Data's bluffing and so forth. And we find out that basically this is a dream. He gets flashbacks to the planet Mars and what's happening on Mars in the past, explosions and so forth. And he wakes up and he's on his vineyard in France. And one thing I will say about this show so far is Patrick Stewart has really nailed it. He's brought back the essence of Picard. It's like he's never really even skipped a day in his performance. After 30 years, I guess you could slip back into that character pretty well. A lot of people are hesitant about this because, and I am to a certain degree, I want to see where this goes in future episodes. This Picard, the series tells you has been for the last 25 years, has left Starfleet for some reason, has become somebody who gives speeches and writes books about past events. But I never saw Picard as somebody that would go back to the vineyard and hide there, because that was kind of resolved in the series. After Picard was taken over by the Borg, he basically went home and he kind of resolved all those old demons. And I see Picard as somebody that might be out on an archaeological dig somewhere on another planet. And I think that to me that would have been a better place for this series to start. Picard is on another planet doing an archaeological dig, and this series motivations comes to him. I would have preferred to see that, but I think because Patrick Stewart wants to go with his world-weary Picard and kind of look at it from a Professor X angle. So next we go to Greater Boston. This is probably the first time we've seen cities on Earth in the 24th century. I think they did a pretty nice job here. Obviously, I think it looks a little bit differently than what you would have seen in the original series, but the city scenes were done fairly well in Star Trek Picard so far. I like what I'm seeing, and we go to the apartment of this young woman and her boyfriend, and they're having a little soiree there, and he goes to get something from the replicator, and he gets killed. And we find out that this woman's name is Daj, and she gets attacked by these men who beam in, and we don't know who they are now, but we suspect from listening to them that these guys are Romulans. I don't really like the whole, and they did this in Discovery too, this whole motorcycle gang element here. I think one of my nicks with this series so far is that I don't think that the imagination is there. I would like to see them imagine more. This is the 24th century. What are we going to see here that looks like the 24th century? I mean, this could happen in any show. Heck, this could happen in Sons of Anarchy. I mean, guys in motorcycle helmets could beam in and knock somebody out and take them with you. And this doesn't scream Star Trek and Romulans to me. And I would like to see a little bit more of a Star Trek bent on some of this stuff. And I'm also not big keen on this black bags over the head type stuff. I think they would be beyond this in the 24th century. This isn't happening now. So they attempt to take away Daj, and they say, well, quick, we got to do this before she activates. So all of a sudden she goes berserk, a la Jason Bourne, and wipes out all these guys, kills them all. They're all dead. She doesn't know what's going on. She knows her boyfriend's dead. She's been attacked, she's injured, and then she gets a vision. And in a vision, she sees this man that she's never seen before, or maybe has seen but doesn't know exactly who he is. And of course, that's Jean-Luc Picard. Now we go back to Picard on his vineyard. I like these scenes. Patrick Stewart and his dog here, number one. Excellent stuff. All the stuff that's on the vineyard is done fairly well, and those scenes are nice. And we meet a couple of his valets or his people who help him out, and they're Romulan. We know that there's some sort of history that has gone on, with John Luke and these people, but we don't know what it is. But they're clearly in his debt and clearly have feelings for the man. And we also meet the manservant, the butler. Somebody made a joke that, Star Trek saved all the Romulans and now they're all working his vineyard. Hopefully that's not the case. So we find out that Picard's going to sit down with this reporter and give an interview of, what he's been doing for the last 25 years. And he made it clear that he didn't want to talk anything to do with Starfleet or why he left. This scene I didn't like at all. I think, once again, the 24th century, we'd be beyond this gotcha journalism. This is very, very 20th century. And to me, I don't get this would really happen. Or that Picard would be really so bothered by these events that he would be a little bit stronger. But, maybe he is as the story goes on. We find out that basically what's happened is, through flashbacks, is that the Romulan planet, homeworld, has been destroyed by a supernova, or is being destroyed by a supernova. Billions upon billions of people are going to die. The Federation's going to help these people, and in the midst of building an armada to help the Romulans, they get attacked by rogue synths who attack Utopia Planitia, which is the shipyard building facility for Starfleet, and destroy a lot of the things going on. And what happens after that is Starfleet, now who is vulnerable, who is bending to the will of member worlds, decide to abandon the Romulans, and that helped them. So let's talk a little bit about all that. First off, the Romulans have a star empire. Thousands of worlds under their thumb. So they may or may not want to help them, but still I don't see where the Romulans wouldn't have a fleet assembled enough that they could really save a lot of their people on their own. But okay, we'll go off that. Assuming that, something's happened where they need Starfleet's help. Now these rogue synths, as we're going to find out, I guess we don't know a lot about them now. Were they a slave force? Were they just so that they would, be a group that would help in building these ships at a rapid pace? What caused them to revolt? We don't know any of that now, but we know that this happened. They said, 90 million people had died. Is this why you left Starfleet? Another thing that's not brought up is, Picard, they blame Picard for some of this. Well, Picard was Locutus, and he has a lot more blood in his hands, but, hopefully he resolved that in the past, but they don't bring up any of the Borg stuff. And Patrick Stewart and Picard does an excellent job in the scene with his acting of a weary man that doesn't want to go over any of this, but he blames Starfleet for basically not being Starfleet anymore, and not wanting to help the Romulans after they, their planet is on the verge of extinction. And it's a great scene. I don't like seeing Starfleet. I don't understand Starfleet's motivation for this. They said it's because of, some bad press they were getting from the other planets. I don't buy that. I don't buy that part of it. But given that, as it may, Patrick Stewart does an excellent job in the scene of playing a world-weary Picard. And here's where he says, "I left Starfleet because it's not Starfleet anymore." Okay. And we'll see more of that coming up. So Daj, who's on the run after that attack, sees this interview and knows that she has to get to Picard. And she does. He gets to his vineyard. They don't show a whole lot of beaming in this episode. You're assuming people are beaming here and there because they're getting there so fast, but they don't show any transporters. They show a lot of vehicles, a lot of shuttles, but no transporters. And the thing is here, I also have to say that, Picard is an admiral, even though he's not with Starfleet anymore, I would think that he would have security on the grounds of his vineyard, so people can't just walk in here and get to him. And even our presidents who've been presidents get security details for life. So this whole scene where she's able just to walk up and surprise Picard, I don't buy a lot of that. But it sets the stage for Picard trying to figure out who this person is. And he talks to her, and she finds out that she's a twin. She has a sister. Well, actually, we don't find out yet, but she has this necklace that is given to her by her father. They fill in some of the details. Picard has another waking dream, or a dream, where he sees Data painting this picture. Data did a lot of painting in the Star Trek The Next Generation series. And Picard is remembering this painting that Data did of a woman. He wakes up and he realizes that the answer's been kind of in back of him all the time, that this painting is hanging on the wall right behind him. So he goes to the Starfleet Museum in San Francisco, and it's a great shot of the San Francisco Bridge and some of the Starfleet Museum. And he's going to go look at some of the stuff that he had left over from the Enterprise. Once he goes to the museum, he sees all this memorabilia from his past voyages. I like this Captain Picard Day banner that we see here from one of the shows. And he finds the painting that Data had left him. The painting in his office didn't show the face. This one does show the face. And it's Daj. And from there on out, we get back to Daj, who's on the run still. This time I believe she's in France, and she's contacting her mother to try to tell that this has happened. Her mother's saying, you got to get to Picard. The mother seems to me that she's either in on it or she's not real. How would she know Picard? Just some of that just didn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And once again, this whole alleyway that she's in looks so 24th century. There's even a fuse box on the wall, like an electric panel, which, not going to be there in the 24th century. So some of the visuals, some of this is really, they didn't have the inventiveness to kind of try to envision more of what the future may look like, and they made it very 20th century looking. So Daj does meet back up with Picard at the museum, and they both talk about some of the stuff they found out. They talk a little bit about Daj's past. And it's explained to Daj that he thinks she's got the memories of Lieutenant Commander Data, that she may be in essence, Data's daughter. Because Data, of course, if you remember the series, always experimented with building another android to be like him. He did build a daughter called Lal that didn't work too correctly. He was talking back and forth. There was an episode called The Measure of the Man, which really ties into this episode quite a bit, that talks about whether Data's a sentient being. Does he have rights? Scientist from the Federation comes from Starfleet, called Commander Bruce Maddox, that wants to basically disassemble Data, and they go through a whole trial, and Data does have rights. But Data and Maddox become friendly, and there's other episodes where he's corresponding with Maddox back and forth. So a lot of this makes sense, and I give them a lot of props for getting into that minutia that they really didn't have to get into. So after talking here about what's going on, they said Daj senses a beam in. For some reason, this scene, another scene that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, she takes Picard to the roof of this building. I'm not sure where they were going. And these guys beam in, and Daj with the Romulans have a big firefight, a big action scene. This takes a lot of time to really transpire, And for some reason, there's no Starfleet beaming in here. There's no Federation security. It's pretty unexplainable how all this could happen. And there's even one of the scenes, a shuttle that's taking off right next to it, and no one tries to help these people. Once again, this is Admiral Picard. I would think you either you know where he is, or at least if there's weapons being fired on a building that's right there in the Starfleet Museum, they would have some kind of security, but that never happens. So that's a little unexplainable. And then eventually what happens is one of the Romulan assailants looks like he's going to suicide himself, so he bites into this pill and then spits it into the face of Daj. I love this emoting here from Patrick Stewart. Daj, it's like an acid that goes on her, and she blows up. And that's the end of Daj. Daj is, as far as we can tell, dead. Daj was a great character. Whether she's really dead and whether she'll come back, we don't know. But remember, this scene here also is a bit is tough to really imagine. This is an almost 89-year-old Picard or 85-year-old Picard, and he gets propelled by this explosion about 50 feet through the air, slammed into a concrete bunker. And he's okay. He's got a few bruises. In fact, when he comes to, he's on the couch of his house, his vineyard. And they make some reference to the police brought him back. Police? I mean, wouldn't Starfleet question what happened? Somebody tried blowing up a famous admiral, a legend? Wouldn't they still be here? This makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. It just almost some people even think that this is all in this whole thing so far has been in Picard's head, that it's not really happening. I don't buy that. I hope that's not true. But it makes no sense that Picard would just be back with his waitstaff after all this happened, and he's able to get up and walk around right away. I don't buy this scene. I wish they had done something a little bit better. So Picard fills them in on what's happening, and he basically comes to the assertion that I've been waiting to die instead of living, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to help this young woman. I'm going to find out what's going on, and I'm going to live. And then he goes to the Daystrom Institute because Daj told him in the past scene that she was being hired by Daystrom. So he goes to the Daystrom Institute in Okinawa, and he talks to I don't even remember her name. I should have got her name, but she's going to be one of the stars of the show. He talks to her. He finds out about Bruce Maddox. He's missing, but he was in charge of this whole thing with the synths. And because the synths revolted and caused all the deaths, now Starfleet, their synthetic division is closed down, where they can work on stuff, they can bring things to the forefront theoretically, but they can't actually do anything. They can't produce anything. They can't make any new synths. They're banned in the Federation. And a lot of the storyline did kind of smack me of Battlestar Galactica and the Cylons. But I'm willing to see where this goes. I'm interested to see what happens. How they tied it into Data is interesting, and bringing back Maddox is interesting. So he finds out that basically no one works in this division other than her and a few other people. This is where they're keeping B4. B4 was a older version of Data that they found on a planet in the movie Star Trek Nemesis. At the end of Nemesis, Data had hoped to put his essence in B4. It didn't really work. It didn't really take. That got lost and he got disassembled. And she pulls out a drawer and there's B4 in a drawer. B4 in a drawer. Wow. So, yeah. So basically, they talk and they find out that basically this whole process made these synths in pairs. And that's how they find out that Daj, while she may be dead, has a sister. has a twin and that she's out there somewhere and that's going to become Picard's new mission, his new reason for living. And then we go from that scene to the Romulan reclamation site. Now, what is a Romulan? What are they trying to reclaim? We don't know. But we follow this Romulan futuristic bird of prey. And we get to this guy who... Let me just stop for a second and say, the Romulans in the show seem very human. They don't really seem alien enough to me. I mean, I know it's been 25 years since The Next Generation, but the Romulans, while they weren't Vulcans because they're related to the Vulcans, they didn't have their logic, but they had a fierce sense of duty. They had a certain stoicism to them, even though it wasn't logic. They felt more alien. And they're really human in this show. His butlers are really human. They really acclimated. And this guy has a British accent. In fact, even the Romulan, the woman that plays his Romulan valet, I think her name is Iris in the show, has a Irish accent. So I don't know what's going on with that. This guy looks like Spock from the Discovery series. In fact, when he came on the screen, I thought this was Spock from Discovery, who sported a beard and long hair for a time in Discovery. So the makeup guys, they got somebody that looks like Spock. But so this guy is running the whole show. We get the idea. He walks in and they do a nice thing where they put in the music of almost like the episode Balance of Terror, which was a classic TOS episode with the Romulans. We get that kind of, so we kind of get the vibe. This guy's the bad guy or will be a bad guy. And we meet Sonji, and she is the daughter, she's the sister of Daj, and she's working with this guy to do something. And he talks about how she works with broken people all day. So what is she doing? How is she working on broken people? What are the Romulans trying to reclaim here? What are they trying to do? We don't know any of that yet. But as the scene goes on and they pull out of the whole scene, we find out that they're on a Borg cube. So something to do with the Borg. I don't know how I feel about this because the Borg has been done to death and not well. The Next Generation kind of defanged the Borg. When the Borg started, they were brought in by Q, and they were this really vile alien threat that had no mercy. They just went to destroy star systems and claim all their technology, and they couldn't be stopped. And they captured Picard and turned him into a Borg, and he slaughtered millions of his people. And then they furthered that in Voyager, where they brought in the Borg Queen, and Voyager had to defeat the Borg, and they brought in Seven of Nine, and they made the Borg almost a little more human. And they really kind of defanged them as villains. They weren't the big threat. They couldn't keep that up. So what they're going to do here, I don't know. So evidently, if she's working on broken people, she must be working on bringing back past Borg members, but then what are they going to do with them? And that is where the show ends. That's Star Trek Picard episode 1. We don't get a lot of story. We get some setup. And overall, I have to say I liked it. I mean, I thought the show flowed well. It was done well. Patrick Stewart was on the top of his game. I guess when they premiered this in London, they showed this as a 3 episode preview. Really, it's a 3-hour pilot that they've split up into three parts. If you remember in Discovery, they did the same thing. They had the first part where Michael Burnham mutinied and how that all happened. And then when they actually got into the first episode of the show, they went forward from there. I kind of think that's what's happening here. Picard's going to eventually get to a new crew, a new ship, but we're not going to see that till after the third episode. And this is all set up on Earth for this. So I'm going to reserve my overall feelings of what I think, if Picard's been successful or not, until I see 3 episodes. But overall, I liked what I saw in the first episode. It was done well. Patrick Stewart was excellent. There's some things I wish they'd changed. I wish it was more 24th century than 20th century in some of the looks of it. I wish they had used less of the Star Trek Discovery ships and more of the 24th century era ships. Some of the tropes with the Fox News news reporter and all that, but I liked it. I mean, it was a good show. It was entertaining, and it did what a good pilot first episode should do: make me want to watch the second episode. And we'll talk more about that when I get into my review of the second episode next time. So I want to thank everybody for coming in and going over and looking at Star Trek Picard with me. I hope you enjoyed it and some of the observations and analysis I gave you about what I saw in the first episode and what I thought of it. And once again, if you like what you see on this channel, which is going to be these type of shows and also comic book reviews, unboxing videos, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and certainly leave me comments about what you would like to see me do in future videos. I'll be more than happy to listen and do what you want to see here. So thank you all for watching. This has been Scarpad, and we'll catch you next time. And remember, keep reading and keep on trekking.